about EC2, which is Elastic Cloud Compute. Sorry. So you must have heard me talking about EC2, or if you join the first introductory session or the day one lecture, I showed you a demo like where we can install or deploy a Linux or Ubuntu or Windows server within few clicks. So that thing is nothing but EC2. So EC2 provides a scalable compute capacity in the cloud. So it has basically two components. One is instance and another is AMI. All right, so it is to have mainly two components like instance and AMI. So instance is nothing but a virtual machine, and AMI is like a software image. It can be Linux, Unix, Windows, or something custom. So let's talk about EC2 basic terminology. Hey Hemang, can you mute yourself? Okay. EC2 basic terminology. So let's start with instance type. So instance type is nothing but like a configuration of different CPUs like memory, storage, and networking capacity. So you will see lots of instances. Like some instances may have one CPU, some may have like GPUs, and like some may have like 4 gig RAM, 8 gig RAM, 16 gig RAM, and storage and different networking capacity. And second thing is key pair. So you must have seen me like downloading that key pair. So there are two types of keys, basically a public key and a private key. So public key is kept by Amazon and private key is kept by customer. So I'll just tell you in briefly like what is public key and what is private key. So with public key, basically anyone can encrypt the information and send it to you. And then you, in order to decrypt that information, you will need a private key. So with that combination, basically public key and private key, you can then encrypt and decrypt the data. So that's why we call it key pair. So in the next slide, so storage location. So EC2 can be deployed in multiple locations, like in any available AZs or regions. In order to maintain security for EC2, there are security groups. So we'll talk about security groups in detail later. So basically security groups will allow what's allowed or what's denied the traffic to that particular EC2 instance. So elastic IP, we talked about this yesterday, and I'll tell you again that elastic IP is nothing but an static public IPv4 IP, which is provided by Amazon, and Amazon charges for elastic IP. Once you assign any elastic IP to yourself, and then you'll get charged for it, no matter what you use it or not. Once you issue one elastic IP to yourself, then you'll get charged for it. And last thing, the tags. Tags is nothing but labels. So you can tag or label your EC2 inventory or basically any AWS inventory with those tags. So it will be easier for you to find those stuffs. All right. So AMI, I already told you in brief that AMI is a software, basically software image. So you have to choose an AMI before launching the EC2. So when I told you EC2 is nothing but a combination, like it provides you compute capacity in the cloud. So you will need some kind of storage. So we can use the two types of different storage. One is temporary storage, which is called as instant store, and the second is persistent storage, which is called EBS volume. So we'll talk about EBS volume today only, but there is a special section given for EBS. So we'll talk in detail about that. So right now, just keep in mind that EC2 can have a temporary storage or persistent storage. Persistent, when I say persistent, means like permanent storage. Okay, and EBS volumes provide the persistent storage, and instant store provides your temporary storage. Okay, so how the pricing is decided for EC2. So let's talk about the pricing model for EC2. So in the exam, you will have lots of questions about this. So just listen to this carefully. So, so EC2 instances, they are charged like depending on, they are categorized into all these options: on-demand, reserve, spot instances, dedicated host. I need to, it's not host, it's host. So I need to correct these spelling here, and saving plan. So let's talk about all those in detail. So we'll start with on-demand. So as the name says, so it's like an on demand. So you pay for a compute capacity by the hour or the second, depending on which instances you run. So there are no longer term commitments or upfront payments are needed. So who is on-demand instances are recommended for who? So it's recommended for users who prefer the low upfront cost and flexibility of Amazon EC2 without any upfront payment or long-term commitment. The applications with short-term, spiky, unpredictable workloads that cannot be interrupted. Application being developed or tested on Amazon EC2 for the first time. So basically on demand is like you don't want to pay high upfront cost, and you want something like, hey, I need it right now, just take whatever you got and go on, move on. So it's like that. So spot instances. So Amazon EC2 spot instances allow you to request and spare Amazon EC2 computing capacity for up to 90% off or on-demand price. So what does that mean is like, so for Amazon too, if those servers, they are just sitting idle, like if there is less traffic in whole AWS cloud, and then Amazon resources, they are just sitting idle. So what Amazon does is, depending on their availability, they will offer, hey, like we have spot instances available. So what Amazon does is, instead of having them sitting idle, why don't you, it just ask customers, hey, why don't, if you want it, why don't you use it? We are offering 90% off. So think of this like uh, let's say a shop owner, like he wants to get rid of his stuff and he offers you the sell. So he can, so it's somewhat similar like to this. So when there are Amazon resources, they are sitting idle, then Amazon just says, hey, I have some free compute capacity available, and I'm offering that for 90% off compared to on-demand price. So it's recommended for who? So applications that have flexible start and end times, which means like there is a flexibility, like there is no time limit, like the developer or the customer can run those application depending on like, they're pretty flexible, like, hey, I can run it in the midnight, I can run it in the morning, early mornings, like that. The application that are only feasible at very low compute prices. So there are some applications who will need like more compute power, what does that mean? More compute power means you will need a powerful EC2 instance, and which means more CPUs, more memory, and in turn, it will, if you go with the on-demand instance, it will cost you more money, because the higher powerful server you go with, Amazon will charge you more money. So those applications, like they need very uh, high compute power, but they cannot afford those high compute prices. So it's feasible for those. And users So next is reserve instances. So reserve instances gives you around like 75% off compared to on-demand instance pricing. So as the name says, it's like a reserved. So when reserve instances are assigned to specific availability zone, they provide a capacity reservation, giving you additional confidence in your ability to launch instances when you need them. Reserve instances are recommended for application with state usage, application that may require reserve capacity, and customer that can commit using EC2 over 1 or 3 year term to reduce their total computing cost. So reserve instances is nothing but like you are reserving when you know like this is the compute power I'm going to need consistently. Then customers, they just know like, hey, I'm going to need that EC2 instance for, I want it running, let's say 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for 7 days a week, or I need it to run for 1 month or 1 year or 3 year. So like that. So you see here, they are mainly for 1 or 3 year term. So when customers are sure about the usage of their application, then they can go with this reserve instances, which means like they know what they're gonna need for sure, and they can take, then they can basically book those, that compute power in advance and avail that 75% discount compared to on-demand instance pricing. A dedicated host. A dedicated host is a physical EC2 server dedicated for your use. Dedicated host can help you to reduce costs by allowing you to use your existing server-bound software license, including Windows Server, SQL Server, Linux Enterprise Server, subject to your license terms, and can also help you meet compliance requirement. Can be purchased on demand, hourly, and can be purchased as reservation for up to 70% of the on-demand price. So what does that mean? So when you go with the reserve instance or on-demand instance or spot instance, you're sharing hardware with some other customer. So there might be a server sitting in AWS cloud, and that cloud on that server, your application is also running, some other customer application is also running. So basically you're sharing a server with all the other people. So dedicated host does what? Like it will give you a dedicated hardware. So AWS will assign you a dedicated hardware, and no one is going to share that. Only you will be sharing it. So why? So some customer, they might have compliance requirement, like it might, they think it's a critical data, it's a government thing or whatever, like, hey, for security reasons or compliance reasons, you cannot share that hardware with someone else. So that's one of the thing. Or there are some licenses things. So those this license for all those different servers like Windows Server, SQL servers cost you money, and sometimes those licenses, they are bound to the hardware. So that's another thing too. So the big companies, like some companies, they pay in advance for those license, and if they go with some on-demand, or if they don't go with the dedicated host or something, they might lose that licensing. So that's the thing here with dedicated host. And the last is saving plan. So saving plan is somewhat similar to reserve instance. So there are offer flexible pricing model that offer low prices on EC2 and Fargate usage. So Fargate is another AWS service. I'm not going to talk about it right now. That's not, you'll not be asked any question about Fargate in AWS exam, the cloud practitioner exam. In exchange for commitment to a consistent amount of usage measured in dollars per hour for 1 to 3 year agreement. So it's like you're making a contract with AWS for minimum of 1 and then up to 3 years. And basically Amazon is charging you money upfront, maybe in installments, but basically you are you're creating a contract with AWS and paying them dollars per hour, depending on whatever contract you sign with them. All right, so before I move into the demo for EC2, I want you to remind about what we discussed yesterday or what we left yesterday. So yesterday we created an VPC. So this is, you see, the outer is basically your AWS cloud, and then there is a region, and in that region, so yesterday we created a VPC in North Virginia region with this public subnet, and inside that VPC we created another subnet with this private subnet address. Okay, So now in our today's assignment, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create an EC2 instance inside that public subnet. And if you remember, I talked about the internet gateway. So we're gonna internet gateway is needed for communication with outside world, which means the internet. And we're gonna set we so that EC2 instance will talk to internet using that internet gateway. So we will need a public IP. So in today's assignment, we're gonna assign a public IP to this instance so that our user here, we're gonna use PuTTY or whatever tool you like from your Windows or Mac machine, we can access this EC2 instance over SSH. Okay, everyone clear? If you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, so before we jump into the actual demo, I wanna talk about the security groups too. So security groups are nothing but a virtual firewall for EC2 instance. So they control the inbound and outbound traffic, which means like what is allowed, what can talk to EC2 inside and outside of your VPC. They are at instance level and not at subnet level. So security groups, if you see any questions in your exam, so keep this in mind. There will be a question for sure in the exam, and this question I'm 100% sure, like a lot of students, they get confused between the security groups and NACLs or network access list. So the security groups, they're bound to instance, and the NACLs, which we didn't talk yet, but NACLs or network access list, they are bound to your subnet. So if you see something like a tricky question like, hey, we assign an ACL to an EC2 instance. So that's wrong. You cannot assign an ACL to an EC2 instance. There will be always a security group assigned to EC2 instance to control the inbound and outbound traffic. An EC2 instance can be part of many security groups. So you can have like multiple security groups, and that EC2 instance can be part of those different security groups. So by default, all inbound traffic is blocked, which means nothing from outside, but anything targeted, like anything targeted to it, that EC2 instance is blocked. And all outbound traffic is permitted. So EC2 instance can talk out to anyone outside, but anything coming inside is blocked. And this is the default settings. Okay, let's do our EC2 demo. And, all right. Okay, so I'm already in my AWS Management Console. So under Compute, you'll see EC2. Let's go there. Okay, so right now we don't have any running instances, 0 running instances, and we are in North Virginia region. So let's hit launch instance. Okay, we're gonna deploy the Linux server here. You see here root device type EBS, which means this AMI supports EBS volume storage. So I'll select that. And here you'll see like the basic information about it. So this Linux 2 comes with 5-year support and bunch of things. So if you're interested in that, you can read like what exactly that AMI has inside. So I hit next, select. Okay, so here you see all these types like general purpose. Then if I scroll down, compute optimize, which means like they have higher ratio of virtual CPU to memory than other families. So general purpose is for your day-to-day like general task. Compute optimize, which means you'll have more virtual CPUs here. use this column in memory. So again, there are GPU instances. GPU instances provide graphic processing units along with high CPU and network performance. So basically machine learning and memory optimized. So they are just categorized depending on the needs of application. Okay, so you see here, we're gonna pick this general purpose. It have one virtual CPU, 1 gig of RAM, instance storage is EBS. Okay, then I'll go to configure instant details. Okay, now it's asking us how many number of instances, so how many instances you wanna deploy. So you can have one, I can put 10 or whatever. So in that one click, it's gonna deploy you those number of instances for you. So let's not worry about purchase options because we're gonna use the on-demand. So network. So under network, you have to pick the VPC. So if you remember, we created one yesterday, the CCP Bootcamp VPC. So you see here, those tags comes in handy because going forward, then we'll have multiple VPCs, and this number VPC for AB, it's really hard to understand or memorize. So those tags will come in handy. So make sure you give tags or labels whenever it's possible. So I'll pick that VPC here, subnet. So yesterday we created only one subnet. That's why it's showing only one subnet. We can create more too, but let's stick to that for now. Then auto assign public IP. Yes, we want public IP so that we can SSH to it from our computer. Then let's not worry about all other things here because that's out of your scope for CCP exam. And if you have questions about those, you can ping me offline later or post in our FB group and I can answer those over there. So let's check other things. Let's keep others as default. And here, okay. So it will have one Ethernet interface and primary IP. So it's saying auto assign, which means the AWS will auto assign and a private IP to that EC2 instance. So we already chose the subnet, our subnet range, it doesn't show here, but our subnet range is 10.0.1.0/24. So I can leave it as is, auto assign, or I can assign IP of my choice. So let me assign it an IP. So when I say use this IP, when this EC2 instance is up, it will use this IP as its private IPv4 IP address. I'm not gonna touch other things. I'll just leave those as default. Then next thing is add storage. So here it has a root volume and it's general purpose SSD. I'll talk about those in one of these slides today only. So I'll just pick the default one. You can increase your size for that root volume. So basically it's a root volume is nothing but your kind of a hard disk here. Okay, and there's an option for encryption. So you can choose encrypt. Right now by default it's non-encrypted, but you can encrypt. Then add tags. Add a tag. So let's add a tag. So I'll add a tag as a web server because I'm going to show you how we can use this EC2 instance as a web server. That's a key name. And so if you have any questions, just post it there. If you have any issues understanding this or if you have any doubts, so I can clarify those right here. Okay, then I will say next, configure security group. So, okay, we talked about it earlier. Security group basically controls what's allowed and what's not allowed inside, outside to that EC2. So let's create a new security group here. And I will give it a name like, say, CCP demo security group. Okay, and description, I'll just say, I'll just use the same thing. Or you can just put allow SSH. It's up to you. What you can put whatever description you want or whatever security group name. All right. So you see here, type under that you see a protocol. So SSH is a protocol. So by default, when you deploy an EC2 instance, so it will have this one entry. So what is that entry? SSH protocol TCP port range 22 source custom 00/0. So what does that mean is the SSH traffic or TCP using port 22 and source, like it's when it's 00/0 means anyone from internet can reach out to this EC2 instance over SSH. So that's how we're gonna SSH. So when someone deploys an EC2 instance, they need to access it somehow. So, and mainly if it's a Linux, they're gonna use SSH. If it's in Windows instance, they're gonna use RDP. So by default, okay, so I think there is one question here from Reshma. We want to do this hands-on, then it will be easier for yes. Yes, of course. That's why on day one, I asked you guys to create your own AWS free account. So it will be easier for you to do all these things hands-on. So it's very important for you guys to create your own AWS free account. You'll not get charged for it. So if you just follow what I'm teaching you here, so you'll not get charged for anything. Or if you are unsure, you can always create those alarms. I told you, like I taught you in yesterday's lecture. That way you'll not be get charged. Okay, so AWS makes this job easy to begin with, like allowing an SSH entry. So let's review and launch. Okay, we're gonna review everything, like everything looks perfect. And I'll hit launch. And we talked about key pair. So let's create a new pair because few people may have missed our first or second lecture. So let's create a new pair. I'll give it a demo. Download a key pair, then launch instance. So if you remember, so this is in PEM format and we have to use in PPK format. So I will use my PuTTY to load that PEM file. Okay, save as a private key. Save it there. We are done here. So let's go back to our AWS portal and see. Okay, so our EC2 instance is ready. So this is the tag we give it a tag, right? Showing up here, so it's easier for us. So you see it's running fine. It's deployed in the availability this zone, and its public IP is this 3.235, and it's going to use this key and the security group which is assigned to it. You can see those things from here too at the bottom. And you remember I gave it an private IP, so it's using that private IP. And this is the public IP over here. Okay, so all right, so let's access our EC2 instance right now. So I see someone raise the hand. If you have any question, just ask in the under question and answers. Okay, so our EC2 instance is ready. So we wanna go there and see. So I'll bring up a putty and I'm gonna copy this address, public address, go to putty, paste the address here, then I'm gonna load the key for authentication. Give this CCP demo key. All right, just hit yes. Okay, so by default, the password is EC2 user. All right, so see, we are logged. Our Amazon Linux instance is ready. So I'm gonna quickly show you like how you can create your own web server here. So this is not the part of exam, but I just wanted to give you guys little, show you some extra things to make things little interesting. Like, okay, so first thing first on EC2 instance, you wanna do update. So if you are not familiar with Linux, so just those commands might look odd to you. What it says, okay, it says you need to be root to perform this command. So I log in as root, so the command for that is sudo su. Okay, I'm in. Then I'm gonna do issue my command again. All right, perfect. There is no update package, which means it's already ready. So for web server, in order to have web server running, so we need to install something called HTTPD. D stands for daemon. Again, if you're familiar with Linux, you will know what is daemon. So let's install the daemon HTTPD. And why this like -y is nothing but like if there are any questions asked during this installation, it will automatically hit yes. It's installing it. You see it's completed. So I want to make sure that it's running. So status. So it says inactive. So we want to start it. Say start. Okay, and let's check the status again. Okay, you see now it's active and running. So let's now go to cd var www. This might look to, if you are not familiar to Linux, it may confuse you, but it's not that hard. It's really simple. So just right now, just pay attention what I'm doing. Okay, and ls command, let me just do clear, so it will clear the screen. Okay, I'll do ls, just list. Ls is nothing but list. So right now there is no index file. So we'll create an index file right here. So let's create an index file. Again, this will not be asked in your exam. I'm just showing you this extra stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna create something. So if you know what is HTML, then you'll understand what I'm doing. And then I'm gonna close it again. So it. I'm gonna write this. Just making sure everything looks good. I think we missed something here. Yep. All right, everything looks perfect to me. So escape, write it. All right. So we just created our sample index page. So let's see if it works or not. So I'll copy this address, go it here, and hit. Let's see what it does. Okay, it's having some access issues. So I know the reason why. Can someone guess what is the reason? Because most likely here, if you go to security groups here, so we see, so we allowed only inbound traffic with SSH. We didn't allow, and so everything other than SSH is blocked to that instance. And in order to access this, we need an HTTP or HTTPS access. So let's go here and add, let's edit this and add HTTP. So it will add your port for you. Again, anything from internet over HTTP can reach out to this. I'm going to add it for HTTPS too. HTTPS or 443, hit save. And hopefully it should work. There you go. You see here, we created that small index file there, and now you can see the message. So it was I think it was a good example of security group. So earlier, even we created everything correctly for our web servers, we are not able to access it because it was blocked. All HTTP and the web traffic was blocked. Only SSH traffic was allowed. Did I accidentally delete the SSH? Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay, just hit save. Okay. All right. So, oh man, again, I forgot to record today. Never mind. All right. So hopefully, I think it was good demo looks to me. I think hopefully you got everything too. So here you can create your own website like this, pretty easy. Nothing in just 5 minutes. You can, if you know HTML, you can create your static index file and dump it there on that EC2 server, and bam, you can just host a website. So let me see. Okay, if we are missing something here. Okay, we covered security groups. We covered, okay, so I think, yep, that's all for EC2. So let's go to our slides. Okay, so let's talk about the elastic block storage. You must have seen while we are deploying that EC2 instance, you must have seen the block storage. So Amazon Elastic Block Storage is an easy to use high performance block storage service designed for use with Amazon Elastic Compute, which is EC2, for both throughput and transaction intensive workloads at any scale. So their life is independent of EC2 instance and can be attached to any other EC2 instance in that same availability zone. So the main difference, like I told you in the beginning, that elastic block storage, they are like a permanent storage, and instant store, they are like a temporary storage. What does that mean is, if you deploy any EC2 instance using instant storage, then if you stop that instance, your data is gone. Whatever data you have had on that EC2 instance is gone. Once you like, anytime you reboot, everything is gone from that root volume when you're using an instance store. And when you're using elastic block store, that data stays there. So even if you reboot, then that data stays there. And their life is independent of EC2 instance, which means, so if you delete, so you created a separate elastic block storage for an EC2 instance, and if you attach to particular, I'm going to show you a demo so it will be more clear to you. So for now, just look at the theory first, that you, so when you create an extra additional EBS storage, or it's, think of it as a hard disk. So it's like a hard disk. So you have like, for your computer, you have already have a hard disk, and if you run out of storage, you want an additional hard drive, you mount it, you create a file system on that, and you basically use it. So with elastic block storage, it's somewhat similar. So, and so once you have once you create an elastic block storage volume, you attach to particular EC2 instance, then you're done with your work. You delete, you terminate that EC2 instance, but you right now you have some data on that particular elastic block storage volume you created. And now you want to use that elastic block EBS volume with some another instance. So basically you can just take that hard disk or EBS and attach it to another EC2 instance. Okay, so if it's not clear to you in this slide, I'm going to explain again in the demo. Again, you'll see, you'll have lots of questions on EBS volumes in the exam. So someone asked me, he say, Vijay is asking, what about outbound rules? So like we discussed in the slide, everything outbound from EC2 instance is allowed by default. And everything inbound is blocked. So if any customer is concerned about like what EC2 can talk to outside world, they can just change it. Okay, but by default, everything going out from EC2 instance, all outbound traffic is allowed and all inbound traffic is blocked. Okay. Hope that answers your question. Okay. All right. Let's go back to EBS volume types. Yeah, what I was telling you, like in the exam, if you are planning to give a certification exam, you'll have again lots of questions on EBS volume too. So basically there are mainly two types, the SSD volumes and HDD volumes. So SSD volumes, they are mainly for high IOPS. IOPS is nothing but input output operations per second. So, and they are good for high performance. So if you need, when your EC2 instance needs a storage with high performance, then you're gonna use SSD volumes. And what is HDD volumes? The throughputs are more important or IOPS, and storage is important or performance. Okay, so for SSD volume types, they have again two types, the general purpose SSD, GP2, and provision IOPS SSD. So what's the difference between these two? So general purpose, like as name suggests, there's a balance between price and performance. And provision IOPS is like, it will give you highest performance, then price will be higher too. So in exam, you'll have a question like, I have this, let's say there is an EC2 instance, it wants to use an EBS volume, and they are concerned about highest performance, which SSD volume type you're gonna use. And then in that case, you're gonna choose the provision IOPS. Then for HDD volume types, you have again two types, the throughput optimized and cold HDD. So throughput optimized, they are low cost. So HDD volumes, they are always low cost compared to the SSD. So, and in HDD volume types again, so throughput optimized is low cost and cold HDD is the lowest of all. So in throughput optimized, is used for what? Like frequently access throughput intensive workload. And cold HDD is used for designed for less frequent access workloads. So, all right. So let's talk about EBS encryption. So I showed you while deploying an EC2, there was an option to encrypt or just leave as is. So that's what it says. You can launch your EBS volume as encrypted volumes. So if you choose to create an encrypted EBS volume and attach it to your EC2, so that data stored and snapshot are encrypted. So what is snapshots? I'll explain in later slide. So at rest means when data is sitting there on that volume, it's encrypted. And with data encrypted on your ABS volumes, you also ensures that security of data in transit, which means in transit means if data is moving from point A to point B, and if it's encrypted, and if it's in encrypted ABS volume, you make sure the security that the data while it's moving from point A to point B, it's also secured or encrypted. So what is EBS snapshots? So you can take point-in-time snapshot of your Amazon EBS volume and store them in AWS S3. So it's like a backup. So you make a backup of your EBS volume and you store that backup into your AWS S3. So S3 is again another simple storage service or another web AWS service used for storage. We'll talk about that later today. So normally people, they take backups some people call it snapshot. There is a difference between a backup and snapshot. So, and you store that snapshot into the S3. So snapshot are incremental backups, which means that only data on that volume has changed after your last snapshot is saved. So let's say you create a snapshot today and your size is, let's say, 10 gig. And tomorrow you add some data to it, and it adds up to 11 gig. So for next day snapshot, it will have the snapshot for that extra gig only, not for the earlier 10 gigs, because you already have the snapshot for 10 gig. So each snapshot contains all of the information needed to restore your data to new ABS volume. Okay, so what about EBS pricing? Let's talk about pricing. So it depends on volumes. So volume, like total storage of all EBS volumes charged as per GB per month. So depending like what amount of storage you have on your EBS volumes is charged as GB per month. Total snapshots stored consumed in AWS S3. So you save those snapshots in the S3. So that's snapshot storage consumed in AWS S3, and EBS snapshot copying between region is also charged. So EBS, you created EBS in particular reliability zone where your EC2 instance is. And if you want to move that EBS volume snapshot to different region, then it's also charged. Data transfer. So whatever coming inbound to EBS is free, and whatever going outbound is charged. And that's pretty much case for most of the AWS services. So whatever coming inside, in terms of data, is free, but whenever you request that data, it's charged. Okay, let's give you guys EBS demo, and I will show you how to create an EBS volume and attach it to a VPC. Not VPC, your EC2 instance. Okay, so we are here only under EC2. You go at the bottom, Elastic Block Storage, you go to volumes. So you see already here, there is an EBS volume, but someone might say, we never created any EBS volume. So what is that? So if you remember, when we created that EC2 instance, this is basically your root volume, a root EBS volume. So now let's create a new volume. It's asking you like what type of volume type you're going to use. It's giving you all those options. So general purpose SSD, provision IOPS SSD, cold HDD, throughput optimize, magnetic, standard. So I'll just go with the default for now. size 100 gig. You can change it. Let's say I just want 10 gigs. It's asking you which availability zone you want to put in. Then it's not, there's an option whether you want to encrypt it or not. So I'll just stick with the default values, and let's add a tag. Say and create a volume, close. So it should show up here soon. Okay, there you go. So you see here, the difference between these two is here, it says in use, and for the one we created, it shows available, which means this EBS volume is ready to be used. So we can do what? So our web server is running out of space and we want to, or it needed some extra volume to store the data. And that's why, let's say we created this additional EBS volume, and we're gonna take some action. So attach the volume to, okay, again, you see those tags come in handy. You're not gonna remember those IDs. So always use tags when possible. Okay, so here, if you are familiar with Linux system, so basically, if you compare with the Windows, like how you have C drive, D drive, F drive, like that. So this is nothing but same thing for your Linux. And so I'm not going to explain you that here. That's out of scope for the exam. So, and I'll just say attach. And you see here, it's in use here. So let's see. I go to here. Okay. So LSBLK just lists the blocks attached to that here. So the one we just created, you see that 10 gig here. So it just got attached to, so earlier, this is the default one, 8 gig. When we created the EBS, that's the root volume. And this is the one we just attached to it, XDVF. All right. So if I decided to delete this web server, then it will get detached and it will sit here. And whatever data it have, we can use, we can just attach that EBS volume to some another EC2 instance in that same region. I hope everyone is clear. So let's go to the next stuff. Okay, we talked a lot about S3. You must have heard me saying S3 a lot of times. So S3 is nothing but a very cool AWS service known as Simple Storage Service. So they combine those three S, and that's how they named it, like S3. So it provides an object storage through web interface. So, okay, so some people say, oh, what is block storage? What is object storage? Like you must have heard me saying like EBS is for block storage and S3 is for object storage. So object is nothing but like, it can be a picture, can be a video, or it can be like a PDF file, text file. But when I say block storage, is more of a, like a file system. So, it's like when I said you like EBS like a hard drive. So in order to use that hard drive, you have to mount it, and for mounting, you need to create a file system over there. That's why that's the difference between a block storage and an object storage. Object is like an object. It can be just a simple file of picture or a video, but blocks storage is like more of a, when you can use it with any operating system. So it will have a file structure and all that. So with Amazon S3, you can store and retrieve any amount of data at any time from anywhere on the web. So S3 don't have any storage limitation. So you can store as many as data you want, and you can access it over the web from anywhere in the world. So let's talk about some basic S3 concepts before we go into the demo. So a bucket. A bucket is a container for objects in S3. So every object in S3 is contained in a bucket. So think of bucket is like a folder. So where you keep your files. So S3 will generate an URL for your object. So how it does is like S3 HTTPS S3 dot bucket name. So let's say you create a bucket name, like let's say a folder dot amazonaws.com slash your file name, whatever object you're going to put there. And the Amazon AWS, excuse me, will create a URL. And if you just copy paste that URL into your browser, it will bring you that file. Okay. And bucket names are globally unique, which means whenever you create a bucket name for yourself, it has to be unique. Like when you create your Gmail account, or like how your username has to be unique, like no one else is using, that is the same concept, like your bucket name has to be unique. Okay, so the S3 data, let's talk about the S3 data consistency model. So it provides read after write consistency. What does that mean is like you can access the object right after anyone copies. So as soon as someone copies there, you can just access it right away. So S3 provides eventual consistency. What is eventual consistency? Meaning, if you update or delete an object in S3 bucket, the change will be eventually propagated and visible to everywhere. So when I say everywhere, means across all the regions. Okay. All right, so let's move. Okay, again, this is very important topic for the exam, the S3 storage classes. So S3 have different storage classes. So standard IA means infrequent access, one zone IA, and glacier and deep archive. So I'll explain those in the next slide. So what is standard? So standard, as the name says, is a standard. So basically whenever you put, it can be, so you want to put your objects in standard when you think you're going to frequently access that data. And you see that durability is like 99.9999. Those are 11 nines. And when you copy your file into standard storage class, it will be copied to at least 3 availability zones. So there will be like 3 copies into those availability, like each availability zone. There is no limitation on like the minimum storage duration should be none. Like you can put a file there and you can just delete it in next minute or so. And minimum billable object size is none. So standard, you're gonna use standard for data like you think you're gonna need it frequently, and it's like important data because it will be copied into 3 availability zones, minimum of 3 availability zones. So if one goes down, you have a copy somewhere else. So what is standard IA? So standard IA is part of standard, but it's used for infrequently accessed data. So there is again price difference. So standard costs you more money. The standard IA costs you less money compared to standard. So it's for the data you need it, but very infrequent. So let's say think of a electricity bill company. So they generate the invoice in a month, and normally people, they're going to access their invoices at the end of the month or beginning of the month. So what they can do is they can put, whenever they generate the invoice, they can put it in standard IA, and at the end of month or at the beginning of month, they can move it to standard so people can quickly access it. Minimum storage, excuse me, is 30 days, and minimum billable object size is 28 KBs. So intelligent tiering is nothing but it's used for like long-lived data with changing or unknown access patterns. So it's more like an automation type of storage where AWS will move your data accordingly into standard or standard IA. And minimum storage duration, again, it will have copies to at least 3 availability zones. So one zone IA it costs you less money compared to standard or standard IA. The reason is what is for it designed for infrequently accessed non-critical data. So think of data like you don't care if it's there, it's good. If it's not there, you don't care. So even if it's get deleted or something, then it's fine. Then that's why you see here it's copied. You will have copy. It's in only one availability zone. Means wherever you copy, where you put your data, that's the only place the data is there. So if that particular availability zone goes down, if you lose your data, then it's gone. You cannot recover it. That's why the price is less, and people put their data here, which is they think, oh, I barely need that data and it's non-critical, so even if it goes away, even if it get deleted, they don't care. And the next thing is Glacier. So Glacier is like long-term data archiving with retrieval times ranging from minutes to hours. So Glacier is used for a data like kind of for your long-term data. Like you might need that data maybe down the road, like let's say after 6 months or after a year or something like that for data analytics or something else. So you don't want to spend extra money putting all that data into standard because you know that I'm not going to need the data right now. I may need it after 6 months, after a year, or maybe after 5 years. Then you can put the data in Glacier. And when you want to access that data, it will take you from minutes to hours. So with the standard Glacier data retrieval, it will take you minimum of 3 to 5 hours. But if you need to access that data quickly, then you can pay the expedite fee and you can just get the data in minutes. But the Glacier will cost you way less than your standard one. Again, it will have at least copies in at least 3 availability zones. Minimum storage duration is 90 days. So like you had to put the data there for at least 90 days, which is like 3 months. And the last thing is Deep Archive. So Deep Archive is again for archiving rarely accessed data with a default retrieval time of 12 hours. So it is for the data for customers like, okay, they will need it, but they don't know when. And they can wait to retrieve that data. So if someone requests the data and they can wait. So you don't have to have access to that data within minutes or within few hours, but you can wait. If you can wait more than 12 hours, then Deep Archive is the thing for you. But that's data, important data. It's rarely accessed and you can wait to retrieve that data for up to 12 hours. So you can see why it's important, because if you see if for any data, if it's copies in multiple AZs, which means customers wants that data, but they just depending on the retrieval time, they can just pick their correct storage class. So this is very important topic for the exam. You'll have again lots of questions on this thing. All right, so let's talk about the S3 bucket policies. So we talk about bucket. Bucket is nothing but a folder where you put all your files. So bucket policies control to buckets and objects based on variety of conditions. So it's like basically bucket policies controls who can access what. Like they will decide the permissions, like who can access the bucket, and if you have access to particular bucket but not into the object, not for objects inside that bucket, and everything is controlled by those bucket policies. So for example, you create a bucket, say folder, and in that folder you put files 1 2 3 4 5. So there is a bucket policy allowing all like public access to that bucket, but for the files in that bucket for 1 to 5, there is no public access for that, which means so even if someone outside can access the bucket, they cannot access the folders, the objects in that buckets. And only the is allowed to associate a policy with a bucket. Okay, then Next thing is transfer acceleration. What does that mean is it enables fast and secure transfer of files over long distances, and it uses the cloud front, the edge location. So if you remember, we talked about edge locations. So if S3 uses transfer acceleration, which uses edge location, which creates the local cache, the edge cache into those respective edge location or regional cache, and that's how it uses, it can serve those files instantly to the user. Cross region replication. So right now we are talking about S3. So S3 supports the cross region replication, which means it enables automatic copying of objects across the buckets in different AWS regions. Okay, so S3 pricing. So it depends on storage class. So what if you pick, depending on what storage class you pick. So if you pick standard I, glacier, deep archive, your rate will be dependent on that. And the second thing is size of storage, like amount of the data you're storing into that bucket. Request, which means like number of requests asking for that particular object. And the last thing, data transfer among the regions. So if you're gonna like, then it goes to those edge locations and all. If you want to transfer the data between the regions, then it will incur you some extra money. So keep these key things in mind. So storage class, mainly the storage class, which storage class you're gonna use for your data storage. It will cost money according to that. If you use standard, that's the highest pricing. If you use deep archive, that's the lowest pricing. Again, in standard class, if you go with one zone I, that's the lowest pricing in standard class. Okay, and size of storage, depending on amount of data you're gonna throw into the S3 bucket, number of people, number of requests coming in to request that objects, and the data transfer among the regions. Okay, let's do the S3 demo. Let's go back to the portal. I'll go to services, you go to storage, and the S3 is here. All right, you see here, this is your like a default S3 dashboard. You create a bucket. Okay, so we gotta pick a bucket name. So like I talked, like I said, mentioned in our slides, the bucket name has to be unique. So let's say if I just use something like my name, try to create a bucket name with my name. Oh, let's use, my name is not that popular. Okay, let's see, something use a common name. Oh, that's available. Oh, that's so weird. Okay, I'll create something like, okay, says bucket name. You see their bucket name must not contain uppercase character. Bucket name must start with a lowercase letter or a number. Okay. All right. I just created. It's asking you which region you want to create your bucket. And if you hit next. So here, versioning. So versioning is nothing but like keep all versions of an object in the same bucket. For example, if you put a object in a bucket and next day you make some changes to that particular object, then versioning does what? It creates like copies, like for the yesterday's one and the next day one. That way, like if someone wants to go back to earlier version, they can always look for it. So versioning, I'm not going to take it. So I'm just going to server access logging. What does that mean is log request for access to your bucket. So if you take that, it will tell you, it will collect the logs for which person tried to access to your bucket. Okay. And you can create again tags, object level logging. For API calls, it will log all the API level logging for API calls. Then encryption, you can choose that here too. I'm not going into the advanced settings, that's out of the exam scope. So just hit next. Okay, you see here, we're at the permissions. So right now by default, it blocks all the public access. So which means no one from outside world can access this bucket. So I'm gonna untick that because we want to access it. So it's just giving us a warning, disabling block all public access may result in this bucket and the objects within it become public. Okay, we are aware of that, we acknowledge it, and we hit next. Okay, and just asking us to review. All right, I'll just create a bucket. All right, so we already created a bucket. We go into that bucket and now we want to put in some files there. Let's upload some files. Okay, I'll copy 2 files there. Okay, it's done. And next, I'll just go default, next, and see it's asking us where you want to put your file. Storage class. So you want to pick in standard, intelligent tiering, standard IA, one zone IA, glacier, glacier deep archive. So I'll just go with the standard by default. And I'll hit upload. So within seconds, our files will be ready there. So let's go here. So like I told you, it will create an object URL. So which is like, this is my bucket name, s3.amazon AWS, and your file name. So I'll click on that. So I'll click on that file name and see whether we can access it or not. So you see here, it's giving us permission denied. So if you remember correctly, what is the reason for that? Because when we created the bucket, we did allow the public access to it, but which doesn't mean it will give access to the files inside that bucket to anyone outside from outside world. So we had to set the permissions for individual files. So let's say I'll click on this and I go to permissions. Okay, you see here, and you see here public access. So I'll enable the public access to everyone, and I want to allow the read access. I'll hit save. Okay, I'll go back to overview. Let's click on it. You see here, it just loaded that file. So you have to assign the permissions at the bucket level as well as the object level inside those buckets. So let's do it again for this file. Go here, I'll go to permission, do the same thing, everyone, and read object, hit save, overview. There you go, it loads the file. All right. I think that's pretty much about S3 as far as exam is concerned. Okay, yeah, and I'll show you one thing also. Like if you go to Amazon S3 here, properties. So these are all different things you can do with your S3 bucket. So you can do versioning, then server access logging, you can store your server access log. So static website hosting, this is pretty interesting. So you can host a static website right from the S3. So you don't need any server or anything to host your website. You can just create a static website using an S3. That's pretty cool. So you don't need any server to just host your website. If you have any static website, you can just use S3. You can dump your object level logging. into the S3. So this static website hosting is really cool, but it's not part of the CCP exam. So I'm not going to cover, but if you have it will be covered in the solution architect exam. So yep, that's pretty much. And so there is no any like minimum storage, like minimum days storage for the S3 bucket in standard class. So I can just delete it right away. And it's asking me, are you sure? It will ask me to type in the name again. Okay, boom, it got deleted. So within seconds, you can put in file there, and anyone from anywhere in the world can access it right away, and you can just delete it whenever you want. Isn't that cool? Okay, so I think that's all I plan to cover today. So let's see. Yep. So let me stop sharing. Okay. Hopefully, it was pretty informative for you and not too much of exhaustive. I hope you learned something new today, and I'm expecting you'll try all those things at home. Please do so, otherwise you'll forget, and it keeps on going interesting going further. So I'm telling you guys, just practice it every day. That's the only way you're gonna master it. So before we conclude, I want to do a quick poll like our daily thing. So let me launch polling. So you'll see two questions in your in front of your window. Please answer it. Yeah, so I'm seeing some results here. So people, please keep on voting. So meanwhile, I'll just share. I'm going to share at the end too the results. So what I'm saying is, look like you students are not. Most of the students are not practicing. I get that. Take your time, but my only main concern is, if you don't do it right now, then you'll forget it. So main thing is keep in the pace. And also see, for some people it's the concepts I'm teaching, they are not getting it completely. They're getting few things and look like they're not getting few of those. So that's why, like, if you have any questions like what you're not getting and all that, so you can either post into the WhatsApp group or Facebook group, or if you can tell personally to Hemang sir, and I'll try to cover those topics again in our upcoming lectures. So don't hesitate. If you have any doubts, I'm here. I'm gonna explain you to my best. And if I don't know that, I'll ask someone who is superior to me. So, but I'm saying don't hesitate, don't hold back, and just ask whatever you think. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna end the
guys,
poll.
everybody make your free account of AWS and practice it at home. We will upload the available videos and all the information in the Facebook group, whatever we have. And if you have any questions, just ask here or in the Facebook group, also in the Facebook page, you can post your questions. So Mukesh will try to answer.
Yeah, and most of you have my personal number because I'm added into the WhatsApp group. So you can, if you're not comfortable, you can ask me directly over there. And someone asked Reshma, hey, sorry Reshma, I forgot to record today. So
I am
I'll
recording, Mukesh. I have the recording for
Oh, you
today.
did? That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, uh, I'm gonna host another batch for different engineering schools. So if some of you think, oh, I need some another lecture, you can join that batch too. But try. My main point is, please create your AWS account. It's free, and practice it there. If you don't practice, you're not gonna learn this. It might seem simple to you when I'm talking or when I'm sharing, but when you actually do it, when you actually do the hands-on, it's a little different. So, and right now I think you do have enough free time. I hope so. Please do it. And yep, that's all from me.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Mukesh. We will meet again tomorrow at 10 a.m.
All right. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.